Hi everyone, I'm Brandon and welcome back to News14s. For 2 weeks, the UK, in partnership with Italy, hosted the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference of the Parties, also known as COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland. A key goal achieved at the summit is an agreement to keep within reach the 2015 Paris Agreement's target to maintain global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, while also trying to aim for a specific target of 1.5 degrees Celsius. The 1.5 degrees Celsius target is the limit scientists believe is required to prevent a climate catastrophe. Prior to COP26, the UN warned that the planet's temperature is on track to rise an average of 2.7 degrees Celsius this century. For reference, the Earth has warmed about 1.1 to 1.3 degrees Celsius. As part of limiting the rise in global warming, an additional goal discussed at the summit is to secure global net zero by 2050. Net zero by 2050 means that by 2050, we should no longer be adding to the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. In this video, I'll cover some of the highlights and lowlights from the conference, which included topics such as deforestation, methane, coal, money and finances, youth action, and cooperation between arguably the two most critical countries in fighting climate change, the US and China. On the topic of trees, world leaders from more than 100 nations, representing about 85% of the world's forests, made a pledge to end deforestation by 2030. Signatories include Brazil, where most of the Amazon rainforest is located, the US, Canada, the UK, Russia, China, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Indonesia. Why does this matter? Trees absorb vast amounts of CO2, around 1/3 of global CO2 emitted each year. So ending deforestation is a vital and relatively easier way to help tackle climate change. Methane is one of the most potent greenhouse gases and is responsible for about 1/3 of current warming from human activities. The US and the EU announced a global partnership to cut emissions of methane by 2030 by 30% when compared with 2020 levels. More than 100 countries signed up for this initiative, but major emitters like Russia, India, and China are not part of the pledge. China has instead pledged to develop a national plan to address methane. For the first time at a COP conference, there was an explicit plan to reduce use of coal. In the final days at the COP26 summit, a deal was reached to reduce our dependence on coal, the worst fossil fuel for contributing towards greenhouse gases, and the one responsible for about 40% of CO2 emissions each year. The main achievements of the deal include the first ever inclusion of a commitment to limit coal use, revisiting emissions cutting plans next year to try to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius target reachable, and increased financial help for developing countries to cope with the effects of climate change and to switch to clean energy. Despite the weakening of the language around coal, which has left some people disappointed, others still see the final deal as a victory, since this is the first time coal is explicitly mentioned in UN documents of this type. The Greenpeace International Executive Director Jennifer Morgan said, "They changed a word, but they can't change the signal coming out of this COP, that the era of coal is ending. It's in the interest of all countries, including those who still burn coal, to transition to clean, renewable energy." In a separate commitment, around 20 major countries pledged to stop funding overseas fossil fuel projects by the end of 2022. Such projects typically burn fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and natural gas without using technology to capture CO2 emissions. One of the agenda topics focused on money and finances. About 450 financial organizations from 45 countries, controlling $130 trillion in private capital, agreed to back clean technology such as renewable energy and direct finance away from fossil fuel burning industries. This is an effort to involve private companies as part of the solution to meeting net zero targets by mobilizing vast amounts of private investments globally to support low carbon and eventually no carbon growth. As for youth taking action, Greta Thunberg, a teen climate change activist, along with indigenous activists and activists from developing nations, led a school strike outside of COP26 that drew more than 30,000 protesters. These young climate activists also delivered a petition to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres to formally declare a climate emergency. The UN has yet to do so. Former US President Barack Obama also made a speech encouraging youth action. As the world's two biggest CO2 emitters, the US and China signed a pledge to work together on an agreement to ramp up their climate ambitions, which included issues over methane emissions, the transition to clean energy, and decarbonization. Although the pledge was made, the details are still vague but indicate an ongoing dialogue between the two countries. During the summit, the International Energy Agency, or IEA, a body that advises governments about energy, calculated that new promises made at COP26, if all fully kept, could potentially limit global warming to 1.8 degrees Celsius. More specifically, the pledges to reduce methane emissions and to reach long-term net zero promises helped lead the IEA to this new calculation. If there's one video to watch from the conference, I highly recommend the COP26 People's Advocate speech by Sir David Attenborough, who is now 95 years old. With his iconic voice complemented with a moving video, he summarizes the climate change problem and potential solutions, urges our leaders to work together, and paints a future of hope where we may see a wonderful recovery from climate change. He stated, "If working apart we are a force powerful enough to destabilize the planet, surely working together we are powerful enough to save it." Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something new and are now even more eager to help battle climate change.